I'm Joan Hume, Director of Community Relations here at the library, and I'm going to welcome our cable TV audience, our AT&T audience, those watching us streaming on the internet, and our live audience here at the library for our first installment of Westport Stories Live. This is a community project to record and archive individual stories of people who make up Westport's history. Westport people have amazing stories. I can tell you, we work around here at the library with them every day, and we know that to be true. Some of these stories are global, while others are as simple as how two people met. Or children interviewing their parents, friends interviewing friends, a neighbor interviewing someone else. They all make up the history of Westport. While we will be presenting some of the stories live and creating other one-on-one stories, interviews, we are working on ways to include people making their own Westport stories that they can submit to the library for archiving. Watch for more information about this as we continue to develop this project. There are two parts of Westport Stories. What you're seeing tonight is Westport Stories Live, where a person is interviewed in front of a live audience. And we are pleased to have Westporter Michael Miller as our first guest. He is Senior Vice President for Technology Strategy at Ziff Brothers Investments and the former Editor-in-Chief of PC Magazine. He will be interviewed by Westporter Mark Mathias, who has worked in the field of and is the technology columnist for Westport News. We want to thank Mark Mathias for his idea and for all his hard work to bring the idea of Westport Stories Live to the library. Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Mathias.
Thank you, Joan. Appreciate your that introduction and setting this up with also Bill Derry and everyone here at the library. It's been great to put this together. And thank you, everyone, for participating in this experiment, which it really is exactly what it is. And Michael, I know you're typically the one who is doing the interviewing in your years of journalism, so I appreciate you being in the other seat tonight and helping us with this.
Happy to be here.
Most people, if you know Michael, Michael has been a journalist for many, many years and is very, very well versed in technology, but you may not also realize he's also well versed in politics and religion and music and all sorts of things. And there's rarely a question that I can ask Michael where he doesn't come up with a reasoned response and a thoughtful response. He's a very, very intelligent person, and it's nice to have him here as the first guest that we have tonight for Westport Stories, because what we're trying to do is focus not so much on the professional careers of people, but actually the personal lives of them, and the stories here in Westport that make up the town and the people of Westport. As Joan was saying, some of the ones we want to do are as simple as, how did you and a child asking, how did you and mom meet? Or something like that, just a very simple story that makes up the nature of this town. And so tonight is not about Michael's professional career, which is extensive. It's more about Michael as a person. And so we have a number of little items that I'd like to talk to him about, and really just get your personal perspectives on these things. And as with many things, it starts with, how did you get to Westport? And how did you find the house in which you now live?
Okay. Well, first of all, I don't know if I can live up to all that you just said about me. On some of those topics, I'm far from an expert. But we ended up in Westport, really sort of almost by accident. We had, my wife and I had met, and we were living in California. And I was working for a magazine out there called Info. And we had just bought a house in Burlington, California, in Silicon Valley. And the day we were to move in, I got a phone call offering me a job in New York. And so we never really unpacked from that house. But I did eventually take the job, and so I was looking for a house here. And we looked at a variety of places, Westport being one of them. What sold Westport to us, partly it was we had some friends who were living here at the time. Interestingly, we had a couple of families that we knew that were living here at the time. They all live now back in the San Francisco area. But so that was an incentive to move to Westport. But we were looking at different houses, and I knew a bit about what my wife wanted. And one of the things, we knew what size house we wanted. We wanted a certain amount of space. We wanted someplace close to downtown. And one of the things she said was she wanted someplace in walking distance of the library. So here we are. I saw the house one night. It looked right to me. So, well, I looked at the house, took a picture or two, put an offer in on the house, and then called home and said, hey, I bought a house. I hope you like it. We've been there about 20 years, so it must have been not too bad.
I see Joan's in the audience tonight, but I won't ask her about that part of it in terms of buying a house sight unseen, but it sounds like that was a good decision for you.
Yes, well, I sent her a video, but I don't think the video came out very well. This is before the era of Skype or cell phones with video or any of that stuff. It's 20 years ago, but we did try.
Good. And an interesting component of your house is its location. I'm going to actually talk a little bit about an item, the Memorial Day Parade, and what that means to you, the Memorial Day Parade here in Westport in your house, and how do they relate to each other?
Our house is on Riverside Avenue, and every year the Memorial Day Parade goes up Riverside past our house and comes around to downtown and to Veterans Green. So every year we get a group of friends together and we put out lawn chairs and we watch the parade from our front lawn. And that's a lot of fun. You know, some years, particularly when our children were younger, one of us would march in the parade with one child. But, you know, it's always good to have friends over, and it's just, we have a perfect view of the parade. Everybody comes by. I see everyone in town.
Your career is a journalist, and in particular covering technology. I know that one of the things that we are on together is a technology committee for the school system. Can you tell me a little bit about your involvement there?
Well, the school system had started a technology committee before I got on it. We had lived in town, and I think it had been going about a year. And Steve Halstead, who was the head of the Board of Education at the time, and who had actually started this committee, called me up and asked if I'd join. And ever since then, this has been probably about 15 years now, I've been on this committee, and we meet once or twice a year. It's not a big commitment of time, but we talk about where the technology is going and what the schools should be doing. It's interesting that some of the things we talked about way back in the beginning are finally now actually happening. I mean, one of the questions we had was, well, when would students start bringing laptops to classes? And we thought it was going to happen probably about 5 years ago, and it didn't really start happening until the last couple of years, particularly the high school. But, you know, obviously when when the town built Bedford Middle and when it rebuilt Staples, how technology got used was a major part of the designs to make sure that there were wireless networks, for instance, to make sure there were smart boards, to make sure there were what we call COWs, computers on wheels, things like that.
And that continues to change too. There's still a lot more going on that in terms of laptops and other things that, I don't want this to be a technology discussion, but where do you see that going in the future in terms of that particular aspect?
Well, I think that clearly more students over time will bring their own personal technology devices to school. Now, whether that's a traditional laptop or it's a tablet or it's a tablet plus a keyboard, I think it's going to evolve. I think there's going to be a variety of things. Right now, we really see the technology being brought to school mostly in the high schools. But as the price of these devices comes down, I think we're going to see it in middle schools in not too many years, and probably even at lower rates. And it is a very interesting change in the way people work. In particular, I think a lot of the curriculum will end up changing to adapt to using the technology so that people can learn more at their own pace and things like that. And I think that's going to be a big change in education, not only in Westport, but everywhere over the next decade or so.
By the way, it'll be fun to look at this in 5 years and see how those comments have evolved. One of the things that we have here in town is the Levitt Pavilion. And based on where your house is, you're kind of just right across the river from the Levitt Pavilion. So you guys get pretty much a free concert anytime there's a concert going on there in terms of being able to hear it. I know where we live, we can hear it most of the time if there's a very loud band. But tell us about your experience with the Levitt Pavilion here in terms of what as entertainment or just how you enjoy that.
Well, we can certainly hear the pavilion when they have a loud concert, but inside the house, I mean, we really don't hear much. Partly, there's the art center is between us and the Levitt, and that blocks a lot of the noise. But we've certainly gone to the Levitt many times, you know, both with the children when they were younger and without more recently, and seen a number of bands there. It's just a fun place to go on, you know, on a summer night, usually on the weekends, just realities of schedules. But it's a great place to go, and you know, you don't have to plan it ahead of time. Nice and easy to go to, and lots of good music.
Do you have any favorite or memorable events that you've attended there that stick in your mind, either from the performance or just something with your friends that is memorable?
Well, I mean, I remember we went and we saw Huey Lewis there. More recently, Southside Johnny, although it was rained out, and they actually did it over at Sagatuck Elementary, the auditorium there, which I remember is the Bedford Auditorium, but not anymore. And so a few bands like that, and just a number of times we saw some local bands like DNR and bands like that.
You travel a lot in your business. I think a lot is probably an understatement, and I think Joan will probably agree with that. What are some of the travel stories that you have? I mean, you travel in and out of here, and you probably have more frequent traveler miles than just about anyone. What travel stories do you have?
Well, I do travel a lot for business. Most of my trips are to the West Coast. You know, I go to many conferences. I think I did 32 conferences last year. And so as a result, I'm not actually around Westport that much during the week. And that's why I said, you know, my wife knows more about what's going on in Westport than I do, and she does, because she's more involved in town committees and things. But yeah, I travel a lot. There are winters in which, you know, I've missed all the snowstorms, and I've been told quite, you know, clearly, you know, I'm never there to shovel the walk. And then there's been winters in which I hit all the snowstorms. It just sort of happens that way. I remember one time we were supposed to be doing an event as a PC magazine, and just could not get that on the driveway. It was just impossible. It just was snowed in that way. There have been times in which I've been in locations and been unable to get back home because the airports are closed and we've had snow like that. Last winter was probably the worst winter I remember, though. There was a lot of snow, and I was around for almost all of it for some reason. And you know, just a lot of snow.
So you were able to shovel the driveway last year?
I did it, although I think, although to be fair, my wife's done a lot more of it than I have, and things like that. But yeah, we had a lot of snow that year. I mean, traveling is interesting. There are pros and cons to all of it. In terms of stories coming here, of course, there was the blackout in New York. What is this now? 8 years ago? 7, 8 years ago?
Something like that.
7 or 8 years ago, and the trains weren't running, so I ended up spending that night, you know, basically on the sidewalk in front of Grand Central Terminal with another Westporter, and things like that. You just wait. You know, not much you can do about it. You know, New York was surprisingly friendly given everything going on. Of course, it was 9/11. Was actually on a plane at LaGuardia when everything happened, and was you know, supposed to be leaving. The plane actually had some mechanical problems. And by the time they fixed that, things had started happening. Nobody knew that it was a terrorist attack at the time we got off the plane. So I got a cab going back to Manhattan. In the course of that drive, everything became clearer, and we watched the towers.
So I did want to talk about, so when on 9/11 you were on a plane, and as you were going back, you saw the towers actually coming down.
Yes.
Okay. And how did that affect you? I mean, we all have a story of where we were on 9/11. What was,
Well, I
as
mean,
you were with a cab driver, I presume.
yes, I was with the cab.
Not a particularly close friend, my guess is. And how was that reaction?
Well, I mean, it's terrible. I mean, just a terrible thing, and you wonder who you know, who's in the towers, and you optimistic about, safety of your friends and all of that. That's probably the first thing that you thought of. I was able to call home pretty quickly, so that wasn't a particular issue. So I wasn't, so I was able to tell my family I was not on a plane at that point, which I thought was important. But yeah, like nobody believed it at first. It just was unbelievable. You didn't expect that to happen. And you start worrying about people who, who work downtown, or people who had meetings in the building and things like that. It's obviously a terrible event. I was able, the cab driver actually decided he didn't want to go into Manhattan, stopped the car, I ended up walking over the Queensboro Bridge into the city, and eventually got a train back here. But it was just, obviously a terrible thing. I did not, as it turned out, know anybody who was in the building, but I did know a couple people who were on planes that morning that were involved.
Interesting. So you were, that day, you were actually able to get a ride home on Metro North or something like that, or a bus?
Yes,
or something?
yes, Metro North actually did run later in the day.
Right. And just to stay with that for just a little bit, how was that train ride home? I mean, the whole day, of course, for many people is just a little bit. How was the train ride?
The whole thing is just, it's unreal. I mean, everybody's just shell-shocked because this is obviously such an unexpected tragedy. Everybody's worried about their friends because there still were friends at the time we hadn't heard from who worked downtown. And everybody's just very worried about lots of things. And everybody's also very friendly. I mean, walking into the city, most people at that point are walking out of Manhattan, walking into Queens on that bridge, and I'm walking the other way. And I've got luggage and the whole 9 yards, and yeah, people are very friendly. And the city was very different at that point, and things like that. We came back, and now there's a lot of talk to people and who's, the parents of our kids' friends who worked in the city, people we know who had meetings at the World Trade Center that day. As I say, luckily, I didn't know anybody who was actually working in that building personally who died. As I say, I did know a couple people on the planes.
When you were back, the days and weeks following that, what was the tenor of the town of Westport during that time? Do you recall?
I mean, I think there was, I think a lot of people were shell-shocked. A lot of people were obviously very sad. The local religious institutions all had services and things like that. On the other hand, obviously things go on and people continue to do things. I think after a couple days, people started going back to work and doing what had to be done because that's the only thing you can do is go on.
We could talk about this for hours, but I want to go back to the other one, the power outage one, which is sleeping on the street in front of Grand Central. Must have been an interesting time.
It was actually really more in the corridor. I don't know if you know the layout, sort of between the Grand Hyatt and the terminal. There's a little corridor. So it wasn't exposed in that sense. But I was with a coworker who lives in town, and we were both trying to get on the train, and obviously that wasn't happening. And it's interesting. Everybody was very friendly. The biggest issue I recall was the lack of open public restrooms. The woman I was with was pregnant at the time, and that was an issue for her and for me too, for other reasons. And so, but we were just waiting there and had, there was emergency lighting was up at that point. We had books and magazines, and we were just sitting there because what else are you going to do? There's really nothing to do because the city is pitch black. You walk out and it's just pitch black, and you're not used to Manhattan being like that.
Interesting. Very nice. There's another aspect of your life that I think is fascinating. Is you are quite a collector of comic books. Tell us about your interest in comic books.
I've been reading comic books since I was, so tall. And I still go to the comic shop every week. There's a great one down the road in Norwalk called Heroes, where they expect me on Saturdays. And I still read. I'm a DC guy, Superman, Batman, Green Lantern. We all have our distractions. And almost every evening I'll read a comic book before going to bed.
And you're also very interested in music. I know you tell me that with your daughter, lose the name on Tuesday nights when the new music comes out. How do you stay involved with music?
Well, I like new music. I subscribe to a service called Rhapsody. There are other services out that are similar. And I can download most new albums on Tuesdays. I mean, you're paying on a monthly basis for basically all the music you can need. I have so every Tuesdays are when new music comes out. I'll go home and I'll typically download an album or two. Most of the time I will say I don't particularly love the music, but if you find one or, you'll find, one or two a month that you like and you can listen to it. So I like to keep up with things. I mostly listen to rock, indie rock, or whatever you want to call it. But lots of new bands.
And do you have a favorite artist that you like, or a particular genre? You said the indie rock is.
Well, I mean, I listen to a lot of different artists. I mean, I suppose overall favorites, there's the usual, Bruce Springsteen, Paul Simon, things like that. Among newer bands, I'm a big fan of the Decemberists, of the Gaslight Anthem. I don't know if you know these bands, but
You're way more cool than I am.
One of the indie artists we like, Josh Ritter, was interesting. He's played in town twice. And we saw him first over at the church over there, and then over at the Sagatuck Auditorium. And he's gone on to have, a decent career. He's not a big star, but he's done a number of albums, and we saw him first in Westport, and that was fun.
What are some of your, let me back up. You've been in Westport, 19 years, I think? 20 years. What are some of your favorite memories of Westport? Things that you've had either with your family or just things that were like, this is just an amazing thing that you've experienced here in town. Do you have any favorite, or whether they're happy or sad, but just what are some things that stick in your mind? If you were to move away and say, I know that about Westport.
Well, I mean, I suppose it's the events that you remember so much. So it's, it's the 4th of July, you meet friends down at the beach, you watch the fireworks with them. That's something you remember, we used to do parties, around New Year's, when all our kids' friends would all show up, and it was just madhouse, and it was a lot of fun. I remember a couple New Year's Eves, again, watching the fireworks and, face painting with the kids and all of those things. And so those kinds of events, I remember, various events at the temple, with the family and things like that. The B'nai Mitzvah and things like that. And these are the things, it's the daily events, the Thanksgiving dinners, the Passovers, whatever, that make for a community. And being at these events with friends, with family. And that's what really makes it work.
Good. I don't have any more direct questions for you, but do you have any thoughts on Westport itself as a town, as a community, as like I said, favorite thoughts or experiences as we kind of wrap this up?
Well, I mean, a couple things that I could mention. My wife has been very involved in the arts community in town, and in particular the Westport Schools Permanent Art Collection. And I think people don't understand the depth of art that the town owns, the school owns, that you'll see in various places. If you walk around to, say, Kings Highway and you look at the auditorium there's just amazing pieces of art in town. And I think that's, this being an artist's community really, I think, has helped build town a great deal. And just truly amazing group of people who have been here, who have contributed to the town in that way. And some of them are artists, some of them are writers, some of them are actors and things like that. Some of them are musicians. And it's great, it's a great part of the town. I can't claim to have any artistic talent whatsoever. I don't, or musical talent. But I can appreciate all of this. And, it's great to be able to see that in town. And there are organizations like the library, like the Historical Society, like the Art Center, that I think are really important in building the town, building the community. And of course the religious institutions as well, and the schools.
All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight, and those of you watching at home and over the internet. Thank you very much for Michael for helping us launch this, and for your time and support for this experiment that we're doing.
Well, glad to be here, and I hope it was useful, and I hope somebody else finds it interesting. And thank you for doing this.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming.
Good.